Welcome to True Drew Podcast, your source for all things Nancy Drew. I'm your host, Avery, and on this podcast, we'll discuss everything from the Nancy Drew books, to computer games, to movie adaptations, and TV shows. Nothing is off the table. So if you're a True Drew, you'll definitely want to tune in for this podcast. Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of True Drew Podcast. I know you guys are used to seeing these episodes drop on Thursdays, but whenever I do these fun bonus episodes, I love to release them on Mondays. And today we're going to be discussing the most recent Danger on Deception Island Clue Crew trip, which was put together by Hannah, who is also nancy.drew.nerd on Instagram. And before I get started, I just want to say Hannah did such an amazing job pulling this trip together. This is actually her third Clue Crew trip that she's put on. She did a Secret of Shadow Ranch trip, and then the second trip was the Haunted Carousel, and then this one, based on Danger on Deception Island, was her third trip. So I think it's safe to say she has figured out this formula. But if you're listening to this podcast episode and you're like, what's a Clue Crew trip? What is the Clue Crew? So, I don't know who coined the term first, but there is a set of books, the Nancy Drew Clue Crew books. They're kind of geared much younger, but at some point, people just started calling us the Clue Crew. This is the crew that just enjoys all things Nancy Drew. And these trips are based on the Nancy Drew computer games. So, if you've ever wanted to feel like you're living out your best Curse of Blackmore Manor life, or Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake life, you can go on one of these trips. Actually, Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, I think the registration opens pretty soon if it hasn't already, but Hannah made a major announcement that Carrie Healy, one of the voice actresses from the games, she voices Hotchkiss, and I believe she voiced Sally McDonald in the Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake game. She is going to make an appearance at that convention, so that is so cool. And actually, we got to meet Scott Cardy, the Scott Cardy who voices Ned Nickerson for the majority of the Nancy Drew computer games on this Danger on Deception Island trip. More on that later. But I guess for this episode, I'll just start from the beginning and talk about my memories from the trip and all of the fun things that we got to do while we were in Seattle. So the registration for this trip was back in 2025. I'm not really sure of the date. I feel like it was sometime in the summer, maybe even in the spring. But Hannah opened up the registration and she actually messaged me and she was like, there's only a few spots left. And I was like, oh, I definitely want to go to this because this is one of my favorite Nancy Drew games. And it's such a good thing that she messaged me because I think she sold out in that day, or if not that day, like the very next day. And I had been messaging back and forth with some of my friends, Lynn, who is Timeless Nancy Drew on Instagram, and Jasmine. I actually met Lynn through the podcast early in, I think it was possibly 2025? Yeah, I think it was March of 2025. And then Jasmine, I actually met her later that same year in October of 2025 at the Lancaster, Pennsylvania convention, which that is put on by Jennifer Fisher. There's actually one this year later in October as well. It's in St. Louis, I think. I'm not going to be able to go to that one and I'm so sad. I really wanted to go to that one. But Jen's conventions kind of center around the books and the games and they're very fun. And Lynn, Jasmine, and our friend Mylea, who I think is Irish Girl on Instagram, we went to that Lancaster convention and we had so much fun. We enjoyed that so much. That convention was based around the book The Witch Tree Symbol and the game Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake. And I also did a bonus episode for the podcast on that whole convention experience. So if you scroll back to like October of 2025, you will find that episode. But yes, I would highly encourage you to check out Jen Fisher's website. It is nancydrewsleuths.com. She's just a wealth of information. She has information on upcoming conventions and registrations, but also resources for how to collect the books. It's just super interesting. So I registered to go on the Danger on Deception Island Clue Crew trip, and I was also talking to another friend of mine at this point. Her name is Elle, and she is Little Miss Drew on Instagram, but we don't live too far from each other, and so Elle messaged me. She reached out and she was like, hey, why don't we travel together to go to this convention? And I was super excited about that because my husband wasn't going to be able to go on this trip with me, and I was like, yes, let's do it. And I had actually met Elle previous to this. I had met her at the same time that I met Liv, who is Ginger Honey Lovebeat on Instagram. We met up and we went to a diner that reminded us of Secrets Can Kill, Maxine's from that game, and it was so much fun. And that's one thing, if you're casually listening to this, you're like, how do people just meet on the internet and then meet in real life? I feel like in the Nancy Drew community, when you meet people, you start by talking online and then you meet in real life. To an outsider looking in, they're like, oh, that's kind of sketchy, or that might be not the best idea. But I feel like the people in this community are some of the best people that I've ever met. Just very wholesome and genuine and friendly. And so I know a lot of people may not be able to understand that, but I think one of the things that I did that I set out to do when I first started this podcast and became a member of this Nancy Drew community was just to be myself, to go into it with my arms wide open. And it's been one of the best decisions that I have ever made because I have made lifelong friendships through this. And it's been so amazing. But anyways, Elle and I were able to coordinate our flights. And we also teamed up with another couple of Clue Crew members. You may know Elizabeth as E. Mullins Streams. She streams on Twitch and I think YouTube. She also makes some of the most amazing handmade products that are based on some of the Nancy Drew games. She makes wax melts, chapsticks, several of which I got at this convention. I'm obsessed with them. And then we also teamed up with Abby, who is Clover Shop over on Instagram, and she also sells some amazing products that are based on the Nancy Drew games. Notebooks, tumblers, and so much more. And we were like, let's go in on an Airbnb together and let's stay together. One of the best things we could have done because we had so much fun. Also, while I'm plugging all of my friends' amazing businesses, I'm going to take a second to highlight Lynn's again. Lynn, Timeless Nancy Drew on Instagram. She has an Etsy shop called Albright Expressive, so you should definitely check it out also. And Jasmine, she's so talented at photography. Like, that's one other thing too. I feel like so many people in this community are so multi-talented, good at scheduling things, creating things, and that is so neat to me. So we decided to rent this Airbnb together. It was in the Cedro-Woolley area. I was saying Cedro-Woolley and I did not realize I was saying it wrong. So sorry to all the Washington State natives. And this place ended up being the perfect home base for us. It was just a few minutes away from where we would all gather for the convention and we would go to other activities. This house was from, I think, the late 1800s or early 1900s, and it was so charming and so cute. It had just enough space for us. We had these communal areas where we could cook and come together and talk and laugh and color and play games, and it was really the perfect place for us to crash at the end of each day. There was even a fire pit out back. I really didn't get to use that too much, and we all had a good laugh because the listing said long driveway. It really wasn't that long of a driveway, but maybe it was for that area. But it definitely made me laugh because I was like, from my neck of the woods where I'm from, a long driveway usually has 2 hound dogs running at you and barking, and it's got gravel and you can't even see the house. So I guess the next thing we did after we planned, and most of the planning goes to Abby, like she is an expert travel planner. She had a spreadsheet and everything. And I love to plan travel, but that was another level. I was like, Abby, you're amazing. But really, we just had to wait until the trip came along because we had several months in between the registration and actually going on the trip. And in that slice of time, I got it in my head that I was going to find a floral suitcase like the one that Nancy uses in that game and several of the other Nancy Drew computer games. If you've ever played the games, you know what I'm talking about. Nancy has this blue floral suitcase. It has a handle. It has no wheels. And I was thinking to myself and justifying this unnecessary purchase like you do. And I told myself, Avery, it's not every day that you go on a Nancy Drew Clue Crew themed trip. If you're gonna do it, you need to go all out. Do it for the aesthetic. So, lucky for me, as luck would have it, I actually found a suitcase at my local Goodwill, and it's a gray floral suitcase. It's, I think, American Tourister or Traveler, something like that. But then, in an even bigger stroke of luck, I was out of the state thrifting somewhere, and I found a matching little personal item bag in the same floral print. So of course I got it. It was meant to be. Now I'm gonna let you all in on a little secret. Luggage pre-2000s era didn't come with all the bells and whistles that we see in modern suitcases today. I feel like now I could give a TED talk on vintage suitcases or suitcases throughout the eras because they don't have as many pockets. They don't even have wheels. And if they do have wheels, they're on the bottom of the suitcase and the suitcase is oriented in a horizontal fashion. It's not vertical. So what you have here is this suitcase full of all your belongings that you have to pull long ways through the airport, and they give you this little leather wrist strap thing. So not only do you have to stoop at a weird, awkward angle and pull this thing along the floor, you have these wheels on the bottom that are spastic and going every direction like a buggy at the grocery store that you have to kick repeatedly to get it to go in the direction that you want it to. But you feel like you're leading this wayward dog around an airport terminal, and the dog gets distracted at every other thing and starts going to the left and then going to the right, and it's a recipe for disaster. So I was not going to do that. I had a smaller version of the suitcase that didn't have wheels, and I had already told myself, I'm just going to do a carry-on. I'm not doing any of this checked baggage nonsense because I would be the type of person to have it go missing. That also just seems like something that would happen to Nancy, and I was like, I just don't want to chance that at the beginning of the trip. And Elle, who was my travel companion, she will tell you I suffered for this suitcase. I carried it around the terminal, slung it up in the luggage compartment. But you know what? I feel like this is a tale as old as time. Who among us women has not suffered for a cute bag? I have done some pretty ridiculous things to justify carrying a cute purse or a cute piece of luggage. And as tired as my arms were after that trip, it was worth it. Now, I didn't pack a horse shirt, unfortunately, because I don't have one like Nancy has in the games. But I did pack a Katie Firestone Charter Tours t-shirt that I made to be able to wear on the whale watching tour. If you ever want to check out my Nancy Drew inspired merch or designs, I actually have a Printify shop which is linked on my Instagram, True Drew Podcast. And I sell the books because I tend to find the books everywhere I go. So anyways, we waited several months. We had several messages with our travel group going back and forth on what we were going to pack because I think most of us had never been to Washington State before, so we knew it would be a little bit cooler than where most of us were from. So finally, the big day came. The trip was just a couple weeks ago over the span of several days in late June. Elle and I actually went to a diner, another diner that reminded us of Maxine's, and that's quickly becoming a theme for us before we flew out the next morning. And the flights were great. We both did carry-on luggage, so we didn't have to wait at the luggage carousel for our luggage to come back around. And we brought things to do on the flight. I brought a couple Nancy Drew books to read because I wanted to keep up with the podcast episodes that I had coming up. And actually, we had some really amazing seatmates. That doesn't always happen when you're on an airplane. These people were really friendly and wanted to chat, and so we talked to people about where we were going. We were like, yeah, we're going to this Nancy Drew convention, and people were fascinated. They wanted to know more, and so that was really fun. Our connection between Baltimore and Seattle was very fast-paced. I remember we just had time to grab a sandwich and then get back on the airplane, and we were so glad that we got something to eat because we would have been starving. But we were able to eat lunch on the flight over, read our books, and just chat. So we landed, we were able to pick up our rental car, and we went to our Airbnb. We actually got upgraded to a Subaru, which was really nice, and I was told later that that is like the car of the Pacific Northwest, so I was like, yes, I'm gonna blend in here, at least when I'm in the car. As soon as I open my mouth, though, all bets are off. And we really just kind of hung out and got acclimated that first night. I got to meet some of my friends in person for the first time, which was really, really cool. I think we ordered pizza because we were just exhausted from all the travel from that day, so that was nice. We got to sit around, eat pizza, and chat. And one of the coolest things about this trip, we talked about this countless times, but it was so neat to be around people that you could quote the games or reference things and other people knew exactly what you were talking about. Because a lot of times, like normal day-to-day life, people are like, what? What is that? Felicity, the door, the door. Nobody knows what you're talking about, right? So that was really neat. When it finally came time to go to bed, I think I unpacked a little bit, which also that suitcase, I had stuffed it to the brim with clothes. I always overpack. I'm a chronic overpacker. And I had also packed it with some books because I wanted to bring books for some of my online friends to have. And I'd also brought these little whale-shaped hair clips. I'm obsessed with strange-looking claw clips lately. And I had found a pack of these on Amazon. And I was like, what better time to wear a whale-themed hair clip than on a trip where we're probably going to see whales? So I got several of them for my friends. I think there was like a humpback whale, a whale shark, all these various sea creatures, and then I had an orca whale clip, which I have still been wearing nonstop even since I got back from the trip. So the next morning, we all got ready and went over to the Floyd Center, which was the event venue that Hannah rented where we could all gather when we had big group events together. And we basically just kind of got to know each other. There were all these little tables set up. We signed in, we got our badges. There were little goodie bags, which had some cute things in them. There was a little little phone charm from Kalina Herman, which is Little Jackalope from Her Interactive. Just all the nautical themed things that you could imagine. And we did some icebreaker type games. We got to play this really fun game where we were asked questions on our preferences, like Frank and Joe versus Ned, or making the food in White Wolf of Icicle Creek versus making the parfaits in Danger by Design. It was really fun to see people's answers, and it was really hard to answer some of the questions. I think this was also the day where we had rotating tables. We got to do trivia, we got to color some things, we got to play Raid, the game from Captive Curse, and there was like an overarching mystery that we got to solve, which was really fun. There was also a little craft station and an escape room activity, which was really fun. I got one of the locks unlocked. Our team did not win against the opposing table that we were going up against, but we did win the trivia section. There were a lot of questions about books and Nancy and Ned, and it was broken down into categories, kind of like Jeopardy, so that was really neat. But the next day, we got to leave from Anacortes to go to Friday Harbor via the ferry, and that was so much fun. We got to watch all the cars drive onto the ferry, and then they loaded the passengers. And we, of course, went straight to the bow, the front of the ship, and took a lot of pictures. We had to reenact Titanic because, what else do you do on the front of a ship? But we kept saying throughout this trip, it was so crazy how Her Interactive really nailed the atmosphere in this game. And they're based in Seattle, so it makes a lot of sense that that was in their backyard. They were able to do all this field research when they developed the game. But there was the fog rolling in over the water, all these little islands that we got to ride past. It's always kind of overcast. I think we saw the sun once or twice on the trip, but it was also in the 50s to 60s. The weather couldn't have been better. We also got to meet a couple other people that I had only previously talked to on Instagram. Ricky, who I think is Lighthouse Gaming on Instagram, and Daniela and Jordan, who are known as DJ Twin Gamers on Instagram. Some of these names are online names, so I'm trying to be respectful of people's privacy, but they own a shop called The Sweetest Books. They sell stickers, Nancy Drew bookmarks, so many amazing pieces of merch. I actually got some Hot Kettle Cafe round coasters from them on this trip, and I am using them every day. I love them so much. But once we got to Friday Harbor, we got to go to the Whale Museum that Whale World in the Danger on Deception Island game is based off of. And it was so cool. It looked exactly like the game. They have a giant orca whale hanging from the ceiling. They have a little phone booth you can go into and you can press all these different noises for the whale noises, which that's also in the game, which I had way too much fun on this trip imitating the whale noises. If you know, you know. I think, isn't it the Dall's porpoise? I don't think it's the mink whale that makes that weird noise that's like, Abby and I had a great laugh at that. I also kept wanting to imitate the weird phone voice from Message in a Haunted Mansion for some reason. The one that's like, actually, Hannah, if you're listening to this, I think that we should make this one of the activities on the next Clue Crew trip, where we have people do quotes from the games and see who can guess them the fastest, or imitate characters or sound effects from the games. I think that would be so hilarious. I volunteer as tribute for that. I am not afraid to look stupid in front of people. But anyways, back to the Whale Museum. There were whale bones on display. There were brains on display. Like, you could see how a human brain stacked up to like a dolphin's brain or different sea creatures. It was really interesting. And then we had this echolocation program that one of the staff put on, and it was so cool. And Jasmine noticed this about the same time that I did. The slideshow that they were using was from 2003, which I'm pretty sure that's when this game came out. So that was really cool. It was like being in a time capsule and actually feeling like you were Nancy going to Whale World. Thankfully, Andy Jason was not there. Oh, another thing that was really neat. In different rooms of the Whale Museum, there were these stained glass windows. I tried to take pictures of all of them, but there were some with orcas and a humpback whale, like all the different whale species. And I feel like this, in the game, there was a nod to stained glass at the Hot Kettle Cafe. You know, the door that you go into is just this beautiful stained glass. There's also the stained glass doors at Whale World. I got to color a bookmark like that, which was really fun. Which, by the way, I think all of the coloring pages that were provided for the convention were provided by Colorable Art on Instagram. She makes these amazing coloring pages with scenes from the different games, like Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, Phantom of Venice, everyone that you could think of. But here's a little fun fact. So Kalina Herman, who used to work for Her Interactive and went as Little Jackalope, her name on Instagram is Story Retold. She also has some amazing merch, which she had at the convention. We got to talking to her because she was sitting at our table and we were asking, like, is there a place, is there a cafe that we can go to in the area that would remind us of the Hot Kettle Cafe? And this is insider information. She told us she talked to the original artists and designers that worked on Danger on Deception Island. There was actually no one physical location that Hot Kettle Cafe was based on. I think they took elements probably from real places, but there's no place in the area that they were like, yes, that is what Hot Kettle Cafe was based on. So that was really interesting to learn because we were all thinking maybe it was based on an actual place. Don't worry, we still got to go somewhere that was kind of similar. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I feel like seeing those stained glass windows at the Whale Museum kind of gave me some Hot Kettle Cafe vibes. So after the Whale Museum tour, we got to walk around Friday Harbor and grab a quick lunch. We ran into a little general store and we grabbed sandwiches, and I think I got some hot coffee because that sounded really good. Oh yeah, and I totally forgot. So the first day when we were doing all those activities and getting to know each other, lunch was also provided and we had sandwiches. It was so funny because it made me think the whole time of Katie and how you can feed her all these strange things. You could put like jellyfish specimen in her sandwich, expired mayonnaise. So we had a lot of sandwiches on this trip. We all kind of joked at the end of the trip, like, we're sandwiched out. We do not want any more sandwiches. But after we grabbed our lunch, we got on the trolley to go over to Limekiln Harbor, where we got to see a lighthouse and walk around this park. That was really nice. I found this little bench and I got to have this peaceful little sandwich lunch and look out at the harbor and up at the lighthouse. The lighthouse itself was really small, but it would really remind you of the lighthouse that Nancy goes into in the game. You get up to the top, there's the actual light, and then you can go out on this little deck around it. So that was really cool. We had a really cool view from up there. There was also a little souvenir shop. There were lots of opportunities on this trip to find really cool souvenirs, which I forgot to mention, but the Whale Museum has a little souvenir shop. I actually got a shirt that says J-Pod on it, and it has all these little whale dorsal fins all over it. It's really cool. And I also picked up a couple of note cards that we found in one of the antique shops around the event venue the first day. They were like a sketch style and they had a humpback whale and an orca whale, and I was like, oh, these would be so cool to hold up in front of one of the islands in the past while we're riding along on the ferry. So now they're displayed in my bookcase along with my Nancy Drew books and lunchbox and notes from podcast listeners, so that's really special. Now when we took the trolley back to Friday Harbor, me and several of my friends from my group saw that there was a long bench seat at the back of the trolley, and we thought, oh, there's a seat, we can all sit there. Well, there was definitely a reason why nobody was sitting there, because when we rode up the first time, we sat in different seats. We did not realize how cold it was going to be in the back of that trolley. So there were open windows on each side. We got blasted by the wind. It was actually pretty hilarious. But our hair, when we got off that trolley, it was just everywhere. Now after this, we all went home, and I'm pretty sure this is when we went to the grocery store, all of my group from the Airbnb. We did a little bit of shopping. E's husband made us dinner, which was fantastic. He made us breakfast most days too, which was awesome. Thank you so much again, Zach. It was all so good. Oh yeah, another funny thing I should mention. So our groups all had names, and that's how we knew when to show up for different activities. So there was, I think, Bess, George, Frank, and Joe, maybe? I think that's all the groups. I don't think there was a Nancy or a Ned group, but I was in the George group, and I personally thought that was very funny because I know I give George a hard time on the podcast a lot. She makes it easy though, because sometimes when you're reading the books, you're like, George, you could just be a little bit nicer. But let's see, I think this may have been the night that we stayed up till 1 a.m. talking. We just got to talking and we had such a good time. We lost track of time, but then we were like, oh, we need to go to bed. But the next morning we went to do the kayaking. Now, I'm not going to lie, the kayaking, I was really excited to go kayaking because I had never done it before this trip, but I was also a little bit nervous. I was kind of scared because I've seen kayaks from afar, but I didn't really know what I was getting into. The thought of being restricted in that way, you know, your legs are down in this hole of the kayak, and it turns out you have to wear a skirt. I did not know what that was, but basically this big rubber thing that pretty much goes around your waist, and then you put it over the hull of the kayak so you keep dry. But the thought of being restricted like that is a little bit scary, especially when you're on the water. So we all got up early-ish that morning, and we went over to Deception Pass, and Elle and I were kayak mates. We decided, okay, we'll be partners in this. She had never kayaked before either. But while we were suiting up in all of our gear, because we had to put on life vests, I had a rain jacket because Elle and I decided we were like, oh, we need to go get a rain jacket because it was raining. It was forecasted like 100% for that day when we were supposed to be kayaking. It did go down slightly, and it was just a drizzle. It wasn't a downpour, which was really nice. So I think that night before, we also went to Goodwill, and we found ourselves some rain jackets. We also ran into another Clue Crew member, Colleen. It was so funny because we were also trying to find Elle part of her costume, her cosplay for the last cosplay dinner. More on that in a little bit, but we were talking and we were like, oh, this is utterly rude. And Colleen came up to us and she was like, I knew my people were here at the Goodwill. But anyways, we got those rain jackets. So we've got those on. We've got the life vests on. We've got the skirt on. I was like, I cannot possibly wear any more gear. But while we're suiting up, I just could not help but think, Nancy has boating accidents all the time in the books. I cannot have a boating accident. That would be so bad. But it was hilarious because the guys who were with the kayak tour company, they showed us this strap on the front of the skirt, and they were like, this is the oh crap strap. If you flip, you pull this and you'll be able to get out of your kayak while you're underwater. And Elle and I just looked at each other like, we cannot pull the oh crap strap. We have to keep this kayak upright. So Elle is a little bit taller than me, so she volunteered to go in the back of the kayak where there's these foot pedals and they steer the rudder, which I didn't know that kayaks can have rudders, but I learned something. I went in the front seat and we were both supposed to kind of paddle and coordinate our paddling on the same side so we wouldn't spin in a circle. So when it was my turn to get in the kayak, I could feel just how tippy that thing was, and I was like, oh no, this is already not going good, and we haven't even left the beach yet. But luckily, I was able to get situated in there. I pulled the skirt around the hole of the opening to the kayak, and then we were floating on the water. Our tour guides pointed out Deception Island, which was right across the pass, and we were kayaking for probably an hour and a half, and it looked so much like when Nancy goes kayaking in the game. It was overcast, cloudy. You can't really tell where the water in the sky starts or ends. And there were also these fighter jets, so there was like a military base somewhere nearby in the area. We couldn't see the planes, but we could hear them because there were so many clouds everywhere. So our tour guides led us around, and we actually got to see some sea caves, which was really cool. I took a few pictures and videos. I was able to put my phone in this waterproof pouch. Thank you again for that, Abby. But I was mostly concerned with keeping us upright. I was like, I'm not gonna flip this thing. I do not want to be the only person who goes overboard. Or well, Elle and I both would have gone overboard. But I think we really got the hang of it. We were pretty good at it, actually. And once we got out in the pass, in the channel, it was really choppy. There were some big waves, and for a minute there I was like, oh, this is kind of scary. But our tour guides also told us that Deception Island was named that because the people that discovered it actually thought it was a peninsula. They thought it was connected to the rest of the land, and then when they went around it, they were like, oh, it's actually an island. So that is how it got the name Deception Island. So we kayaked around Deception Island, and then we went back to shore. And as we were paddling back to shore, I'm not gonna lie, I was trying to go for my personal best. I was like, how fast can I get back to the shore? Because I also had a bunch of messages on Instagram that I was looking at on the beach before we got in the kayak, and everybody was like, don't have a boating accident like Nancy. And a part of me was like, I have something to prove here. If I can just finally make it back to land, I can say, I did not have a boating accident. And we didn't. Elle and I both survived. So after the kayaking, I was just thrilled that I didn't flip the boat. So I rode that high for the rest of the afternoon, and I think we went to a Sasquatch store that we saw on the side of the road. Abby really wanted to go to that, and it was really fun. It was at this point in the trip we started making these little videos. We would see things that would remind us of the games, and we're like, oh, do this quote from Shadow Ranch, or do this one. I'm going to compile that into a fun reel, so stay tuned for that. But we did that, and then we went on the whale watching tour, which was really cool. That was like a 2 to 4 hour event. We got on this private charter boat and we went way out into the ocean. And we actually got to see a gray whale. We got to see orca whales. We even saw an eagle out there. It was like standing on a little post that was in a shallower area. And we saw some sea lions. That was a really awesome experience. And you could just tell that the people on this boat were really passionate about conservation and the whales. Now, we got back from that and we went to bed. And I don't think it was this night. We went somewhere to eat. Maybe it was the night before or the night before that, but Abby, Elle, and I went to this little restaurant that was really close to some train tracks, and we got to try some clam chowder. It was so good. We made it our mission. We were like, on this trip, we have to try clam chowder, and we have to have some blueberry muffins. So we actually got her some blueberries from this little farmer's market, and she made us blueberry muffins, and they were delicious. Definitely one of the highlights of the trip. But really, the next day, we had most of the day free. We had a lot of free time. So we went to a couple more Goodwills, and Elle, her cosplay costume was hilarious. So the sewing task that you have to do in Secret of the Old Clock, you have to make that dress for Jim Archer's wife. Elle was like, oh, I bet I could find a red dress at the thrift store and we could pin it up and get some chalk or maybe some fabric tape and we could mark it up and make it look all weird, like the hem is uneven. So we set out to do that. That was really fun. We also ended up finding a piece for Ricky's cosplay. She was going as Renata from Captive Curse. I found a little dog toy up at the checkout of this thrift store and it looked just like the Black Forest cake. And I was like, oh, you have to get this. And then pretend to be asleep in a chair. So that was really fun. We went to an antique shop. And then I broke off from the group for a little while to go see one of my other friends from Instagram. Her name is Grace. Her Instagram handle is the Paperback Princess. But we got to meet up at this really cute cafe in this place called Le Connor and have lunch, and it was so good, and it was so fun to talk to her. I love getting to meet people who are into the Nancy Drew community or people who just kind of stumble into it and find my podcast, and that will always be so neat to me. Like, the internet can be bad for so many things, but it's also good. Like, you get to connect with people who love the same things as you. But Grace, if you're listening to this, it was so fun to get to meet you. Thank you for showing me around and taking time out of your Saturday to hang out with me. I also want to take a second to plug her book because Grace has written a book. It's a Regency style novel, so if you love Jane Austen, you would love this book. It's called Accomplishments and Accomplices. She has it in book format and as an audiobook, so definitely check that out. As somebody who is also in the process of writing a book and wanting to pursue that avenue, it was really inspiring to get to talk to somebody who has gone before me and done it. So after this, we all got ready for the cosplay dinner, and I went as Katie Firestone. That seemed like the obvious choice because my hair looks so much like hers. I wore the vest, the green shirt, high-waisted jeans, and it was funny because there was actually a couple other Katies and we staged a photo op at the dinner. Someone thought ahead and brought this giant blow-up jar of mayonnaise, and it was the most funny thing I'd ever seen. There were people dressed up like Holt Scotto, Professor Hotchkiss, someone dressed up as Caddy. It was so funny. We all got to take a lot of pictures. We had dinner, and Scott Carty, who voiced Ned Nickerson, was there. We got to have a Q&A with him, which was really fun. And we got him to sign some pictures, like the picture of Ned from Nancy's phone contact, which was hilarious. We also got to buy some merch, and we just generally had a good time. I also got to meet another friend from Instagram, Lily. If you're listening, hey Lily, it was so fun to get to meet you. It was just a great way to conclude the trip. And actually, Abby, Elle, and I stayed an extra day. So we moved to a hotel closer to the airport, and then we got to go book shopping. Lily tagged along with us, and we went to this place called Bigfoot Coffee. It was really good. And we went to a half-price books where everybody found some Nancy Drew books, so that was really awesome. At this point, I had a little bit less in my suitcase, so I was able to fit a few things in, like souvenir-wise. We also got to go down to Pike Place Market. We saw them throw some fish. We got some more souvenirs. We saw the original Starbucks. Seattle is such a coffee town, so I really loved that. The entire trip, I was like, I'm going to get coffee from here, I'm going to get coffee from there. I was in heaven. And then that night, Abby, Elle, Daniela, Jordan, and I, we all went to get dinner at the Cheesecake Factory, and that was so fun. I'm just so glad I got to spend so much time with so many people that I had been wanting to meet for a while. I had talked to you guys on the internet, and it was so neat to meet you in person. But like all good things, the trip had to come to an end, but I could tell like all of us didn't want to leave. We were having so much fun. But Abby, Elle, and I flew out the next day. We got to hang out in the airport for a little while and get some coffee. And then we all went home. But this was one of the most fun trips that I've ever been on, and it was so neat that it was so Nancy Drew centric. We got to quote the games, we got to do things from the games, and it was just such an amazing experience. There were also so many other people that I got to meet that I didn't get to spend a ton of time with you guys, but I was so happy that I got to meet you. Victorious1 on Instagram, Tori, Plants Gone Pear-Shaped, Amanda. There's too many people to mention. But one of the coolest things about this trip, it would be really interesting to know where everyone came from, because people came from all across the country. I'm not sure who came the farthest, but a lot of us came a long way to get together in Seattle and hang out together. And that's pretty special. But I think that pretty much sums up the entire trip, everything that we got to do, all of my memories surrounding it, and I hope that I get to go on more Clue Crew trips like this in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed this bonus episode. If you went on the trip, share your thoughts in the comments, or message me on Instagram. I'd love to know what your favorite part was. Until next time, whales rule! Thank you for listening to this episode of True Drew Podcast. Can't get enough of the podcast? Then check out my subscription series, True Drew Files, available on Apple and Spotify. For Nancy Drew books and merchandise, you can check out my website, www.truedrewpodcast.com. For business inquiries, you can contact me at truedrewpodcast@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram at True Drew Podcast.